Taking a chance on someone with a troubled past, a millionaire hires a woman recently released from prison. As she integrates into his home, unexpected events unfold that challenge prejudices and lead to astonishing transformations for them both. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The December wind howled through Manhattan's steel canyons as Jack Morrison stood in his penthouse on Fifth Avenue. At 62, his silver hair and tailored suit couldn't mask the emptiness in his eyes. The wall-to-wall windows of his study offered a panoramic view of Central Park, now bare and gray in winter, much like his life since Sarah's passing 8 months ago. He ran his fingers along the mahogany desk where Sarah used to write her letters. Everything in the room reminded him of her. The antique lamp she'd discovered at an auction in Paris, the worn leather armchair where she'd spend hours reading, even the slight scuff on the hardwood floor from her favorite chair. Wealth surrounded him. Original paintings adorned the walls. Rare first editions filled the shelves. Yet none of it mattered without her. Meanwhile, across town at the Rikers Island Correctional Facility, Tasha Williams gathered her few belongings. At 34, she'd spent the last 5 years behind bars for a crime born of desperation. The guards processed her release with mechanical efficiency, returning her old clothes and the few personal items she'd entered with. A silver locket containing a photo of her sister, a worn notebook filled with recipes, and $87. The February morning bit at her skin as she stepped through the gates. Freedom felt foreign, almost threatening. Her sister's letter burned in her pocket, the first communication they'd had in 3 years. The words were simple but loaded with meaning. "I'm sorry. I should have believed you. Come home when you can." But home wasn't what it used to be, and Tasha knew she needed to build something new. That same afternoon, Jack sat in his private club, the leather chairs and dark wood paneling a cocoon of privilege. His friend Marcus, a fellow board member at several companies, watched him with concern over a glass of aged scotch. "You can't keep living like a ghost, Jack," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of friendship. "Sarah wouldn't want this." Jack stared into his untouched drink. The house feels like a museum. Every room, every object, is just a reminder of what's gone. Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Have you considered getting some help? Not just the usual staff, someone different. Someone who could bring some life back into that mausoleum you're living in." "What are you suggesting?" "There's this program I'm involved with. Rehabilitation through employment. These people aren't your typical domestic staff. They've lived real lives, faced real challenges. Sometimes what we need isn't another yes man, but someone who understands loss, struggle." Jack's first instinct was to dismiss the idea. His world was one of private equity firms and charity galas, not ex-convicts and rehabilitation programs. Yet something in Marcus's words resonated. Sarah had always believed in giving people second chances. She'd started numerous educational initiatives in underprivileged communities, always saying that talent and potential could be found anywhere. That evening, as Jack returned to his empty penthouse, he found himself drawn to Sarah's study. Her social work degrees hung on the wall alongside photos of her with the people she'd helped. In one image, she stood beaming outside a women's shelter she'd helped fund. Her passion had always been about bridging worlds, connecting people across social divides. He picked up her favorite fountain pen, still sitting where she'd left it. For the first time since her death, he felt a spark of purpose. Perhaps this wasn't just about finding help. Maybe it was about continuing Sarah's legacy in his own way. Tomorrow, he decided he would contact Marcus about that program. Not because he needed the help, but because somewhere out there, someone needed an opportunity. And maybe, just maybe, that connection could help fill the void that seemed to grow larger with each passing day. The Metropolitan Job Center stood in stark contrast to Jack's usual haunts. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the institutional beige walls. Jack adjusted his Italian silk tie, feeling conspicuously overdressed among the worn plastic chairs and dated motivational posters. The program coordinator, a practical woman named Ms. Chun, had arranged 5 interviews for him. 4 candidates had already come and gone, all perfectly qualified, all somehow lacking the indefinable quality Jack couldn't quite name. Then Tasha Williams walked in. She wore a second-hand navy blazer, carefully pressed but slightly too large for her frame. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, revealing high cheekbones and eyes that held both wariness and determination. Jack noticed how she scanned the room before sitting down, a habit learned from years behind bars. But it was her posture that caught his attention. Despite everything, she sat straight, dignified. "Your resume says you worked in food service before," Jack began, scanning the single page before him. "Yes, sir. Started as a dishwasher at 16, worked my way up to line cook at the Golden Spoon before." Tasha paused, then continued with deliberate honesty. "Before my incarceration, I also ran the prison kitchen program for 3 years." Jack leaned back, studying her. "That's not exactly the experience one might expect for a personal assistant position." "No, sir, it's not." Tasha met his gaze steadily. "But I can tell you this. I understand systems, organization, and most importantly, I understand people. In prison, you learn to read situations, to anticipate needs before they're spoken. Those skills translate anywhere." Something in her directness reminded him of Sarah. His wife had always cut through pretense, seeing people for who they were rather than what society labeled them. "Tell me about your goals," Jack said, deviating from his prepared questions. Tasha's hands, folded neatly in her lap, tightened slightly. "I want to open my own restaurant someday. Not something fancy, just good food, made with care, in a place where everyone feels welcome. But first I need to rebuild, learn how to exist in this world again." The honesty of her answer hung in the air between them. Jack thought about his own struggle to exist in a world without Sarah, how wealth and status had done nothing to ease that particular pain. Later that evening, at the mandatory family dinner in his sister Patricia's Upper East Side townhouse, the reaction to his decision was precisely what he'd expected. "Have you lost your mind?" Patricia's voice carried that particular tone of aristocratic horror she'd perfected over years of social climbing. "An ex-convict? In your home? What would Sarah think?" Jack watched the steam rise from his untouched soup. Around the formal dining table, faces he'd known all his life regarded him with varying degrees of concern and disapproval. His nephew Charles, newly made partner at his law firm, cleared his throat. "Uncle Jack, have you considered the liability issues? The potential damage to the family's reputation?" "Sarah," Jack finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm, would have been the first to offer Tasha a chance. The mention of his late wife's name silenced the table momentarily. Patricia reached across the table, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "We're just concerned about you, Jack. Since Sarah's passing, you haven't been yourself. Making rash decisions isn't going to bring her back." Jack stood up, placing his napkin beside his plate. "No, it won't bring her back. But maybe it's time. I started living the values she believed in, rather than just funding them from a safe distance." As he left the dining room, the muffled discussions behind him confirmed what he already knew. This decision would have repercussions far beyond simple employment. He thought of Tasha's straight spine, her clear-eyed ambition despite everything life had thrown at her. Something told him she was used to people underestimating her, judging her based on preconceptions rather than potential. Tomorrow, she would start working for him, and for the first time since Sarah's death, Jack felt something close to anticipation for what the future might hold. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as Tasha followed Mrs. Garcia, the longtime housekeeper, on her orientation tour. Her footsteps echoed on marble floors that probably cost more than her old neighborhood's entire block. The opulence was overwhelming, but it was the photographs that caught her attention. They lined the hallway in elegant silver frames, a beautiful woman with laugh lines around her eyes and honey blonde hair. In every image, she radiated warmth, planting a community garden, speaking at charity events, embracing children at what appeared to be an orphanage. Sarah Morrison's presence lingered in every corner of the house. Mrs. Morrison had a way with people, Mrs. Garcia explained, noticing Tasha's interest. She could make anyone feel special, no matter who they were. The older woman's voice carried a note of grief that matched the hollow feeling in the house. Later that afternoon, while organizing files in the study as requested, Tasha came across a wedding photograph. Jack and Sarah danced, caught in a moment of pure joy. The image stirred memories of her own losses. Her mother's funeral when she was 12, her father's slow descent into addiction, the day her sister chose her boyfriend's lies over Tasha's truth. "That was our 20th anniversary party," Jack's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking more human in casual clothes than he had in his business suit. Tasha carefully returned the photo to its place. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have dash." "No, it's fine." Jack moved into the room, picking up the frame. "Sometimes I think we keep too many memories locked away in this house." Sarah would have hated that. She believed memories were meant to be shared. They sat in the study, the late afternoon light painting shadows on the walls. Jack spoke about Sarah's work with underprivileged communities, her passion for social justice. Tasha found herself sharing too, about the childhood dreams of opening a restaurant, the series of bad decisions that led to trusting the wrong person, ending in a drug possession charge that changed everything. "I was supposed to be the success story," Tasha admitted, her fingers tracing the edge of her water glass. "First in my family to go to college. Had a scholarship and everything. Then Dad got sick, bills piled up, and this guy I knew said he had an easy way to make money." Jack listened without judgment, a quality Tasha hadn't experienced much in recent years. "We all make choices we regret," he said finally. "The question is what we do with the chances we get afterward." Days turned into weeks. Tasha learned the rhythm of the house, the way Jack took his coffee, black with 1 sugar, his habit of working late into the night. She organized his schedule, managed correspondence, and slowly began to add her own touch to the household routine. But underneath the growing comfort lay a current of unease. She noticed the way some of Jack's business associates looked at her during meetings, the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The weight of her past hung heavy, especially when she overheard fragments of phone calls from Jack's family, their disapproval clear even through closed doors. One evening, while preparing Jack's weekly schedule, she found herself starry. In a photo of Sarah working in a soup kitchen. The woman's compassionate smile seemed to mock Tasha's presence in this world of privilege. "I'm not a charity case," she murmured to the photograph. "I won't let them make me feel like one." Jack, passing by with a stack of documents, paused. "Sarah never saw anyone as a charity case," he said quietly. "She saw people as people. Nothing more, nothing less." Their eyes met in the reflection of the photo frame's glass. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of shared pain. But Tasha quickly looked away, focusing on the calendar before her. She was here to do a job, she reminded herself. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet as she worked late that night, organizing files in the quiet house, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was becoming part of something larger than herself, or the fear that it could all disappear as quickly as it had appeared. The smell of sautéed garlic and fresh herbs filled the penthouse kitchen at midnight. Tasha stood at the professional-grade stove, her laptop propped open on the counter, displaying an online culinary course. She discovered that Jack rarely used the kitchen, and the night hours became her sanctuary for practicing. "I thought I smelled something amazing." Jack's voice came from the doorway. He'd clearly been working late again, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. Tasha quickly straightened. "I'm sorry, I should have asked before using the kitchen dash. This is your home too for now," Jack interrupted, moving closer to inspect the pans. "What are you making?" "Coco vin," she replied, then added with a small smile. "The online course says it's a classic French dish. I figured if I'm going to dream, I might as well dream big." Jack leaned against the counter, watching her work. "Tell me about these courses." Tasha explained the online culinary program she'd enrolled in, using her savings from her new salary. Her hands moved confidently as she spoke, reducing sauce, checking temperatures, adjusting seasonings. "You know," Jack said thoughtfully, "I'm hosting a small dinner party next week. 20 people, nothing too formal. The usual caterer canceled." Tasha's hands stilled over the stove. "Mr. Morrison dash, Jack," he corrected automatically. "Jack," she amended. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Consider it a practical exam," he said, already pulling out his phone. I'll have Mrs. Garcia assist with service. Unless you don't feel ready?" The challenge in his voice matched the gleam in his eyes. Tasha felt a familiar surge of determination, the same feeling that had gotten her through prison, through judgmental stares, through every obstacle life had thrown at her. The dinner party transformed the penthouse. Tasha worked tirelessly, planning a menu that balanced sophistication with comfort. She chose dishes that told a story, appetizers inspired by her grandmother's recipes, but elevated with classical technique, main courses that married her soul food background with French refinement. The night of the event, Jack's guests represented New York's elite: hedge fund managers, gallery owners, philanthropists. Tasha watched from the kitchen as they arrived, their jewelry catching the light, their conversations a subtle dance of power and influence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jack's voice carried across the room as the first course was about to be served. "Tonight's menu has been prepared by a remarkable new talent. Please welcome our chef, Tasha Williams." The silence that followed her entrance was deafening. She felt the weight of their stares, saw the slight raising of eyebrows, the exchanged glances. Then Jack smiled at her, not with pity or encouragement, but with genuine pride. Tasha straightened her chef's coat, a gift from Jack she'd found hanging in her room that morning. "Tonight's menu begins with a reimagining of my grandmother's black-eyed pea fritters, served with a preserved limo and aioli." As the evening progressed, the initial skepticism gave way to genuine appreciation. She heard snippets of conversation, extraordinary balance of flavors, such unique interpretation. Where did you discover her? But it was the quiet moment after the guests left that meant the most. Jack sat at the kitchen counter while she cleaned up, despite her protests. "You know," he said, finishing the last bite of dessert, "Sarah always said true talent doesn't need validation from the right people. It simply needs an opportunity to shine." Tasha paused in her cleaning. "Why are you doing all this? Really?" Jack considered the question carefully. "Maybe because for the first time since Sarah died, I'm seeing possibilities instead of just memories. Or maybe," he smiled slightly, "I just really enjoy good food." The moment held potential for something more, something neither of them was ready to name. Tasha turned back to the dishes, but her reflection in the window showed a woman she was starting to recognize again. Someone with dreams, someone with a future. The kitchen had become their sanctuary in the early mornings, when the city was still waking up. Jack would read the financial papers while Tasha experimented with breakfast dishes, their comfortable silence occasionally broken by shared observations or quiet laughter. This particular morning, Tasha was plating a perfect Eggs Benedict when she caught Jack watching her instead of his reports. His expression held something beyond mere appreciation for the food, and the realization sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "You're staring," she said, keeping her tone light as she garnished the plate with fresh herbs. "You remind me of Sarah sometimes," he replied, then quickly added, "Not in the way you might think. It's your passion, the way you light up when you're creating something." The comparison to his late wife hung in the air between them. Tasha set the plate down carefully, very aware of the growing tension. "Jack," the elevator's ping interrupted whatever she was about to say. Patricia Morrison's voice carried from the foyer, sharp and clear. "Jack, we need to talk." Jack's expression tightened, but he didn't move from his seat. Patricia appeared in the kitchen doorway, her Chanel suit and perfectly coiffed hair a stark contrast to the casual morning scene before her. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Tasha in casual clothes, clearly comfortable in her brother's space. "I see the rumors are true," she said coldly. "What rumors would those be, Patricia?" Jack's voice held a warning. "The board is talking, Jack. Your behavior, these choices you're making. There's concern about your judgment." Patricia's gaze flickered to Tasha. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Tasha." Patricia's perfectly lined lips thinned. "Very well. The family's lawyers have expressed concern about your recent decisions. There's talk of evaluating your capacity to manage the Morrison Foundation's assets. Because I hired someone with actual life experience instead of another social climber's daughter? Because you're allowing your grief to cloud your judgment." Patricia's composure cracked slightly. First hiring a convicted felon, Now these rumors about inappropriate relationships. What would Sarah think? Tasha felt each word like a physical blow. She began gathering her things, but Jack's hand on her arm stopped her. Sarah, he said quietly, dangerously, would be disgusted by this conversation. We're trying to protect you, Jack. The foundation, the family name, these things matter. Father built this legacy dash. Father built an empire on other people's labor while keeping them at arm's length, Jack interrupted. Sarah was the one who taught me there was more to legacy than money and social standing. Patricia's voice softened with calculated concern. If you continue down this path, there will be consequences. The board, the family, we can't support choices that threaten everything we've built. The implications were clear. Choose between his world and whatever was growing between him and Tasha. After Patricia left, the kitchen fell into heavy silence. Tasha stood at the sink, her back rigid. Maybe she's right, she finally said. I should step back, give you space to dash, don't. Jack's voice was rough with emotion. Don't let them make you doubt your place here. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And what exactly is my place here, Jack? Am I your employee? Your project? The question hung unfinished between them. Jack stood, moving closer until they were inches apart. You're the first person since Sarah who's made me feel alive, he admitted quietly. And that terrifies everyone, including me. The honesty in his voice broke something in Tasha's careful composure. I can't be Sarah, she whispered. I'm not asking you to be. His hand found hers, warm and steady. I'm just asking you to be you. The rest we'll figure out. But as they stood there, hands clasped in the morning light, both knew that Patricia's visit was just the beginning. The worlds they came from, the expectations they carried, everything was about to become much more complicated. The announcement of the charity gala sent ripples through New York's social circles. Jack's decision to host it at his penthouse was traditional enough. The Morrison annual charity gala had been a fixture of the social calendar for decades. His insistence that Tasha would be the executive chef, however, was not. You're putting a lot of faith in me, Tasha said, reviewing the guest list. CEOs, politicians, old money families whose names graced museum wings and hospital buildings. I'm putting faith in your talent, Jack corrected, watching her work on the menu in his study. Besides, every great chef needs their breakthrough moment. The preparation consumed the next few weeks. Tasha worked tirelessly, testing recipes, coordinating with suppliers, training the temporary staff. Jack found himself spending more time in the kitchen, ostensibly to taste test, but increasingly just to be near her. The night of the gala arrived with the weight of expectations. The penthouse transformed into a showcase of understated luxury, with flowers from the city's top florist and vintage wines from Jack's private cellar. Tasha's kitchen hummed with controlled chaos as she directed her team with quiet authority. You clean up nice, Jack said, finding her in a quiet moment. She wore a chef's coat that he'd had specially made, her name embroidered in elegant script. Save the compliments until after they taste the food, she replied, but her smile betrayed her confidence. The guests began arriving at 8. Jack watched as Patricia and her circle claimed their usual corner, their disapproval evident in subtle glances and whispered conversations. He noticed how they avoided the past appetizers, as if Tasha's food might somehow taint them. The foie gras is excellent, announced William Carnegie III, seemingly oblivious to the social undercurrents. Where did you find the chef, Morrison? Before Jack could respond, Patricia interjected smoothly. Jack's been engaging in some charitable employment practices lately. Charitable? Jack's voice carried across the room. Is that what we're calling recognition of talent now? A hush fell over the gathering. Tasha, emerging from the kitchen with the main course, froze in the doorway. Perhaps this isn't the time, Patricia said tightly. No, I think it's exactly the time. Jack moved to stand beside Tasha. Every person in this room claims to support second chances, rehabilitation, equal opportunity. We put our names on charitable foundations and pat ourselves on the back at galas like this. But when faced with actual change, actual opportunity to make a difference, we retreat behind our prejudices. The silence deepened. Tasha touched his arm gently. Jack, don't dash. No, they need to hear this. My wife understood that real change doesn't happen through distant donations and tax write-offs. It happens through direct action, through giving people like Tasha a genuine chance to succeed. Patricia's face had turned an interesting shade of red. This isn't about second chances, Jack. This is about you trying to replace Sarah with Dash. That's enough. Jack's voice cut through the room like steel. Tasha is here because of her talent, her determination, and her character. Anyone who can't see past their own prejudices is welcome to leave. Now! No one moved. In the frozen moment that followed, Tasha stepped forward. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the strength of someone who had faced far worse than social disapproval. The main course tonight is a tribute to both classical French technique and my grandmother's cooking. She raised 3 children working as a cook in homes like this one, dreaming of the day she could open her own restaurant. I carry her dreams with me, along with my own. Now, shall we serve? The tension broke gradually as servers began presenting the plates. The food, as Jack had known it would be, was exceptional. Even Patricia's circle couldn't maintain their boycott in the face of such culinary artistry. But later, after the guests had left and the staff had cleaned up, Jack found Tasha alone in the kitchen, her composure finally cracking. "You shouldn't have defended me like that," she said quietly. "Not with so much at stake." Jack moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her voice. "Everything of value in my life came from taking stands that others thought were wrong. Sarah taught me that." Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the social barriers between them seemed to dissolve. But before either could speak, Mrs. Garcia bustled in with final cleanup instructions, and the moment passed, leaving both of them aware that something fundamental had shifted. The morning after the gala, while New York's social media buzzed with whispers about Jack Morrison's impassioned defense of his convict chef, Tasha found herself in the penthouse garden. The small rooftop space had been Sarah's project. Herbs, flowers, and small vegetables growing in carefully maintained beds beneath the Manhattan sky. She heard Jack's footsteps before she saw him. He'd loosened his tie, looking worn after a morning of damage control calls. "The board wants an emergency meeting," he said, joining her by the herb garden. Apparently, my public outburst was unbecoming of the Morrison name. Tasha continued tending to the basil plants, her movements precise. "You have to stop fighting your entire world for me, Jack. I'm not worth losing everything you've built. Aren't you?" He stepped closer, and she could feel the warmth of him behind her. "What exactly am I losing? A family that measures worth by bank accounts? Friends who judge character by social standing?" She turned to face him, her hands still covered in garden soil. "I know who I am, Jack. I've made peace with my past. But your world, they'll never let you forget it. Every dinner, every event, every board meeting will become a battle. Then let it be a battle." His hand found her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You want to know what Sarah's last words to me were? Don't let them turn you into what they want. Be who you are." The mention of Sarah usually created distance between them, but this time it felt different. Like a blessing, almost. "And who are you, Jack Morrison?" Tasha's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone who's tired of living half a life. Someone who sees you, really sees you, Tasha. Not your past, not your circumstance, just you." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable. His lips were gentle against hers, asking rather than demanding. Tasha's hands clutched his shirt, leaving smudges of garden soil on the expensive fabric. Neither CA. Red. When they finally parted, Tasha rested her forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "This changes everything," she murmured. Everything needed to change. His arms tightened around her. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm just asking for real." The elevator's ping shattered the moment. Patricia's voice carried from below, accompanied by others, board members, based on the formal tones. "They're early," Jack said, not releasing Tasha. "The meeting wasn't supposed to be until tomorrow. You should go." Tasha tried to step back, but his arms held firm. "No more hiding," he said quietly. "No more apologizing for choosing happiness." They descended from the garden together, hands clasped. The group waiting in the living room included Patricia, 3 board members, and Jack's family lawyer. Their expressions ranged from shock to calculated neutrality, at the sight of Jack and Tasha's joined hands. "This is exactly what we feared," Patricia began, but Jack cut her off. "Before you start, know this. I'm not giving up Tasha, the foundation, or my position. You want to fight? You'll get one. But remember, I control 51% of the voting shares." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Morrison, consider your reputation dash." "My reputation?" Jack's laugh held no humor. "My reputation was built on profiting from others' labor while maintaining social distance. Maybe it's time for a new reputation. One built on actually living the values we claim to support." Tasha squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his conviction even as she felt the weight of the room's judgment. The battle lines were drawn, and there would be no easy retreat for anyone. As the confrontation escalated, Tasha realized that this moment wasn't just about her and Jack. It was about challenging a system that kept people in their assigned places, about proving that love could bridge the artificial gaps society created. The garden soil still under her nails felt like a reminder. Growth requires getting your hands dirty. And sometimes, the most beautiful things bloom in the most unlikely places. The aftermath of Jack's confrontation with the board rippled through New York's social circles like a stone thrown into still water. The Morrison Foundation's headquarters buzzed with whispered conversations and furtive glances as Jack and Tasha walked through the lobby, heading to his office to review the foundation's outreach programs. "They're not even trying to hide their stares anymore," Tasha observed, her professional attire doing nothing to shield her from the scrutiny of Jack's employees. "Good," Jack replied, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "Let them see what change looks like." In his office, they spread out proposals for new foundation initiatives. Jack had been serious about transformation, not just in his personal life, but in how the Morrison Foundation operated. The new programs focused on rehabilitation through employment, culinary training for former inmates, and small business loans for underprivileged entrepreneurs. "Your sister's call," Jack said carefully, watching Tasha review the documents. "Are you going to return it?" Tasha's hands stilled over the papers. Her sister Lisa had left 3 messages in the past week, each more urgent than the last. The latest mentioned medical bills and their father's deteriorating condition. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "Last time I tried to help them led to 5 years in prison," Jack finished. "But you're not the same person you were then. Neither are they, probably." Before Tasha could respond, Jack's assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Morrison, the Reuters reporter is here for the interview about the Foundation's new direction." Jack stood, adjusting his tie. Ready to go public? Tasha felt a flutter of anxiety. "Are you sure about this?" "Once it's out there, I'm sure about you," he said simply. "The rest is just noise." The interview took place in the conference R. Boom! Its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a dramatic backdrop of the Manhattan skyline. The reporter, Rebecca Chun, was known for her sharp questions and sharper insights. "Mr. Morrison," she began, "your recent changes to the Foundation's focus have raised eyebrows. Some say it's a dramatic departure from your father's vision." "My father's vision was limited by his time and perspective," Jack replied. "The world has changed. We need to change with it." Rebecca's eyes shifted to Tasha. "In your relationship with Ms. Williams, how does that factor into these changes?" "Tasha showed me that talent and potential exist everywhere," Jack said. "We just need the courage to look past our preconceptions." "Ms. Williams," Rebecca turned to her, "your background is quite different from the typical Morrison Foundation executive. How do you respond to those who question your qualifications?" Tasha met her gaze steadily. "My different background is exactly what makes me qualified. I've lived the reality of the people we're trying to help. I know what it's like to need a second chance." The conversation continued, touching on the new initiatives, the Foundation's shifting priorities, and yes, their relationship. But it was when they discussed the culinary training program that Tasha truly came alive, describing her vision for creating opportunities in the food industry. Later that evening, as they reviewed the interview transcript in Jack's study, the phone rang. It was Lisa. Tasha stared at the caller ID, her hand hovering over the phone. Jack squeezed her shoulder gently. "Whatever you decide, I'm here." Taking a deep breath, Tasha answered. Lisa's voice, tired and stressed but undeniably familiar, filled her ear. "Tash, I saw you online in that article about the Morrison Foundation. You look good, sis. Lisa, Tasha's voice cracked slightly. How's Dad? Not good, the doctors say. Lisa paused. I know I don't have any right to ask after everything, but we need help, Tash. Real help, not just money. Jack watched as Tasha closed her eyes, years of pain and love and complicated family ties playing across her face. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. I can't go back to who I was, Lisa, but maybe we can all move forward together. The conversation that followed was difficult, full of tears and old wounds, but also possibilities. When it ended, Tasha found herself in Jack's arms, letting out breath she'd been holding for years. Family, Jack said softly, is complicated. Believe me, I know. But sometimes the hardest bridges to build are the most important ones. Looking up at him, Tasha saw her future reflected in his eyes. Not just their love, but the chance to heal old wounds and create something new. Something that could help others find their own paths to redemption and success. The oncology wing of Bellevue Hospital smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. Tasha gripped Jack's hand as they walked down the sterile hallway toward her father's room. 5 years had passed since she'd last seen him. 5 years of prison walls and shattered trust between them. You don't have to do this, Jack reminded her gently. Yes, I do. Tasha straightened her shoulders. You taught me that running from the past doesn't heal it. They found Lisa outside the room, looking older than her 30 years. Her eyes widened at the sight of Jack Morrison in person, the man whose foundation was now paying their father's medical bills. Tasha, Lisa stepped forward hesitantly, then stopped. I didn't think you'd actually come. Neither did I, Tasha admitted. The sisters stood awkwardly until Lisa broke, pulling Tasha into a fierce hug. Inside the room, their father was a shadow of the strong man Tasha remembered from childhood. Cancer had hollowed his cheeks and stolen his proud posture. But his eyes, her eyes, were clear as they found her. My girl, he whispered, reaching out a thin hand. I'm so sorry, baby. F.O. are everything. Tasha moved to his bedside, years of anger melting into grief and love. Daddy. Jack stepped back, giving the family privacy for their reunion. He watched through the window as 3 broken people began the delicate work of healing. Their tears and laughter carried faintly through the glass, reminding him of his own family's failures and possibilities. Later, in the hospital cafeteria, Lisa looked at her sister with new eyes. You've changed, she said. You're stronger now. We all are, Tasha replied, watching Jack return with their coffees. Sometimes strength comes from unexpected places, like falling in love with a billionaire. Lisa attempted a joke, then sobered. I saw what they're saying about you both online. The comments, the judgment. Let them talk, Jack set down their drinks. Actions speak louder than words. The conversation shifted to practical matters, treatment options, home care, the culinary training program Lisa had expressed interest in joining. As they talked, Tasha felt pieces of her life clicking into place, broken fragments reforming into something new and stronger. Back at the penthouse that evening, they found Patricia waiting in the lobby. Jack tensed, but his sister's usual imperial manner was notably absent. I've been thinking, Patricia said, her voice unusually hesitant, about what Sarah would really want. And Jack's tone was guarded. And Patricia turned to Tasha. I may have been hasty in my judgments. The Foundation's new programs are showing remarkable results. Your culinary initiative in particular has potential. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Patricia Morrison, it was seismic. We're hosting a family dinner next Sunday, Jack said carefully. You're welcome to join us. Us. Patricia's eyebrow lifted slightly. Us, Tasha confirmed, her hand finding Jack's. Patricia nodded slowly. I'll bring the wine. Something new. Something different. As they watched her leave, Tasha leaned into Jack's embrace. Your world is shifting, she observed. Our world, he corrected. And it's about time. That night, as they lay tangled in sheets that cost more than Tasha's first car, she traced the lines of Jack's face in the darkness. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this path. Jack caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. I regret the years I spent playing by their rules instead of making my own. Sarah knew better. You taught me better. The mention of Sarah no longer brought pain. Just a gentle acknowledgement of the love that had shaped Jack into the man who could love Tasha freely, completely. Outside their window, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds, a city of endless possibilities and rigid divisions. But in their embrace, those divisions dissolved, proving that love could indeed bridge any gap, heal any wound, and build something beautiful from the broken pieces of the past. The foundation's new direction, their relationship, her family's healing. All of it was a testament to the power of second chances and the courage to take them. As Tasha drifted to sleep in Jack's arms, she knew that their story was more than just a romance. It was a revolution, quiet but profound, changing lives one brave choice at a time. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Grand Ballroom buzzed with New York's elite at the annual Business Leadership Awards. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering of billionaires, politicians, and social luminaries. Jack stood at the podium, preparing to accept the Humanitarian of the Year award for the Morrison Foundation's groundbreaking work in rehabilitation and employment programs. Charles Whitmore III, one of the city's most influential venture capitalists, intercepted Jack before he could begin his speech. His voice was low, meant only for Jack's ears. Think carefully about what you're about to do, Morrison. Going public about your relationship with this woman will have consequences. Several major investors are prepared to withdraw their support from both the foundation and your companies. Jack's grip tightened on his prepared speech. In the front row, Tasha sat beside Patricia, both women resplendent in evening wear. The past year had transformed them all. Patricia had become one of their strongest allies, and Tasha's culinary program was changing lives across the city. Are you threatening me, Charles? Warning you. As a friend. Charles glanced meaningfully at Tasha. There are still those who believe some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. Jack stepped up to the microphone, his decision made. The room fell silent. Hundreds of expectant faces turned toward him. He set aside his prepared remarks. A year ago, he began, I thought I knew what legacy meant. I thought it was about preserving wealth, maintaining social order, staying within the lines we'd drawn for ourselves. He paused, finding Tasha's eyes in the crowd. I was wrong. The ballroom remained silent as Jack continued. Real legacy isn't about protecting what we have. It's about creating opportunities for others to build something new. My late wife, Sarah, understood this, and someone else helped me remember it. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Jack stepped away from the podium and walked to where Tasha sat. He extended his hand to her. Tasha Williams isn't just my partner in life, he announced as she rose to stand beside him. She's also the new executive director of the Morrison Foundation's Culinary Arts Initiative, a program that has already helped hundreds of former inmates build new lives. The silence in the room grew heavy with tension. Charles Whitmore's face had turned an interesting shade of red. But more than that, Jack continued, she's the woman who taught me that true worth isn't measured by bank accounts or social standing. It's measured by the courage to stand up for what's right, the strength to overcome adversity, and the wisdom to see beyond our prejudices. Tasha stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. When I left prison, I thought my life was over, that my mistakes would define me forever. She surveyed the room, meeting the stares of New York's elite with quiet dignity. But every person deserves the chance to rewrite their story. That's what the Morrison Foundation now stands for. Not charity, but opportunity. Not handouts, but partnerships. Charles Whitmore stood, his voice cutting through the room. This is precisely what we feared. The Morrison name, dragged in a dash. Into what? Jack interrupted. Into actually making a difference? Into proving that social barriers are artificial? Into showing that love can transcend class and circumstance? You're destroying everything your father built. No. Jack's voice was firm. I'm building something better. Something real. He turned to address the room. Those of you who want to withdraw your support, feel free to do so. The Morrison Foundation will continue its work. Because some things are worth more than money and social approval. The tension in the room was electric. Then, slowly, Patricia Morrison stood and began to applaud. Others joined, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction. The sound swelled, drowning out the protests of the old guard. Later that night, as they swayed together on their rooftop garden under the stars, Tasha looked up at Jack. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He pulled her closer. "Because love isn't about playing it safe. It's about having the courage to stand up and say, 'This is who I am, this is who I love, and this is what I believe in.'" "And what do you believe in, Jack Morrison?" He smiled, touching his forehead to hers. "I believe in second chances, in breaking down walls, in love that doesn't ask for permission or approval." He paused, his voice softening. "I believe in us." Above them, the New York sky sparkled with possibility, while below, the city hummed with the energy of change. Their story had become more than just a romance. It was a testament to the power of love to transform not just two lives, but an entire system. And as they held each other under the stars, they knew that some revolutions begin not with shouts and protests, but with two people brave enough to choose love over convention, truth over tradition, and hope over fear.